Ted Berliner's with us from Newsmax TV. Jeff Yastine, financial editor at Newsmax.com and moneynews.com as well. Great to see you both.
It's great to be here and speak money.
We will talk about money and something that I worry about every single day, and that is the cost of college. I have a 2-year-old daughter, so this is something a lot of folks, grandparents and parents alike, are thinking about. Americans have always believed that going to college is a necessity to be able to succeed in life, but studies are showing the risk of high debt incurred may not be worth the reward of a degree. Of course, here to discuss that is Jeff Yastine to talk to us about this. Jeff, let's take a quick look at some graphics we have prepared about the cost of college right now. We can get those up on the screen real quick. In 2011 and 2012, it was $14,300 at public institutions, $37,800 at private nonprofit institutions, and $23,300 at private for-profit institution. Now, between 2001 and 2002 and 2011 and 2012, prices rose 40% at public institutions and 28% at private nonprofit institutions. This after everything was adjusted for inflation, and these coming to us from the U.S. Department of Education. So, you look at the rapidly increasing price of college education, certainly not keeping up or way outpacing inflation or growth or regular economic growth here. Is it time for kids to say, maybe college is not for me?
I would disagree, only because you have to look at college as an investment, but like everything else, it's the price you pay for that investment that determines how much value that investment has. And depending on the choices you make as far as how quickly you want to get through college, do you need to work your way through college? Are you going to go in-state, out-of-state, those sorts of choices, and of course, what major are you going to get? All those play into that role.
Yeah, the data shows that if you do earn a college degree, you will make a lot more than somebody that has just a high school degree, of course. But then we can also take into account things like plumbers and electricians who seem to be making more money, sometimes even more than college grads.
No, certainly that could be the case, or it definitely is the case. As any of us who've hired a plumber or electrician for a house
or a car mechanic
know that very
matter.
well. But at the same time, higher education being what it is, and with the sorts of, thinking of management and the different things that really are required of our 21st century economy, college is absolutely necessary. And the data, the New York Times just had an article this morning about the new data from, I think it was the Labor Department, and showing that equation of whether it's worth it to go to college, is it worth it? Absolutely. It's even more clear now than it ever was.
I can say this, but while John was saying this, I kept getting Judge Smales, Ted Knight, as Judge Smales saying, and the world needs ditch diggers too, Danny. One way or the other, they got to be in there somewhere. But when we look at kids trying to get that, I'm looking here at a list of things that seem to be insurmountable from the colleges. Certainly the NCAA and college athletics drives a lot of this, because there's a lot of colleges running a deficit, even though they claim they make money from the different bowl games, which they don't. The Federal Clery Act, which says they have to keep every student safe and secure, complying with that. You have a central complaint system for all military and veteran students. Every institution has to identify a single point of contact for all complaints. We have all of this that's part of administrative bloat, which is that great phrase. So if all that money is there and the schools have to incur all that debt, they're going to pass it on sooner or later. So how do you bring down the cost of an education?
And I think we're beginning to see that already. If you look through the various published reports, you'll see where, number one, there are actually a lot of small private colleges that are either beginning to merge, some are beginning to close. It's less evident now because the economy is doing well, but the next time we hit a recession, you'll see more of those sorts of situations taking place. And I think we're beginning to see less hiring on the part of universities. The New York Times and the Post actually were carrying articles recently talking about layoffs, which you don't typically see, of administrators, but it's long overdue, and they're just barely scratching the surface. Obviously, there's a great deal more that needs to be done on this end.
Is that just where we're going here? Consolidation of schools seems to be inevitable, and that means there's going to be a lot of teachers out of work.
Yes, because we're reaching that tipping point that a lot of people have studied this for a long time, have thought we would get to, but we hadn't yet, which is that just recently the actual rising cost is actually rising less than it had been previously for the last 10 or 20 years. And something we're getting at the tipping point where a lot of parents and obviously adult students are saying, you know what, no more. I can't do this anymore. We've got to figure out some other way. technologically, there are other aspects that can be pursued here as well through distance learning and those sorts of things. And all that's beginning to wear away at this edge that colleges had previously.
And technologically, online courses aren't any cheaper. I mean, if you look at them, sometimes those are just as expensive, despite the fact that you never leave your house.
But that's, I think, one of the keys, though, is that you don't have to bother paying for room and board. You know what I'm saying? You can work theoretically. There's a lot of things that still need to be worked out in that sort of a deal. And none of this is ever going to be perfect, right? It's an imperfect system. You can even argue, I think quite realistically, that a lot of this inflation that we're seeing, it began back in the 70s when you had the government begin to offer a lot more in the way of student loans. So it's a victim of its own success, and we're all having to pay the price for it now.
Yeah, also important to note too, a lot of college presidents starting to face some more criticism about their high salaries. If folks look at the highest paid state employee in a lot of states, aside from maybe a high-priced college football coach, a lot of times that is a university professor. All right, Jeff, we want to move on also and talk about another topic as well, and that's the ongoing attempted merger by Comcast and Time Warner Cable here. Is it going to be good for the customer? Is it going to be bad for the customer? That's where we're at right now. With a lot of things, but the New York Times is calling on the Justice Department and the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, to block the $45 billion acquisition. What's your take on that? You think the FCC will step in?
I think they probably will see the merger go through, and here's why. Even though I tend to agree with what the New York Times is saying here as far as it being bad for consumers when you have one company controlling that large of a block of the overall segment within the United States. At the same time, now you've got AT&T and DirecTV with their proposed merger. So in some ways, that gives the antitrust folks a chance to say, all right, we can approve both of these, and we'll have two large competitors. Now, typically, antitrust regulators like to see three strong competitors in a marketplace. So the question is, who's number three? And there's a lot of talk on Wall Street now about perhaps Verizon looking to buy Dish Network, because Dish is kind of the last man standing in that kind of satellite TV segment. So, if you saw a pair up like that, which has been talked about in various published reports, then it kind of clears the way for something like this to happen, despite, I think, the very reasoned objections of the New York Times and others about a group like Comcast and Time Warner Cable getting together.
Yeah, we've heard about other smaller cable companies, like a company like Charter Communications, which was supposedly in a position to take some of Comcast or Time Warner's market share to make this a little bit more appetizing for federal regulators. Do you think that would make much of a difference? I mean, are those people even competing in the same arena if they have, hundreds of thousands of subscribers compared to 35 million?
Yeah, I think the key is footprint. And at what level do you get to a footprint like 30 million subscribers the way Time Warner and Comcast would have, or the way AT&T and DirecTV would have? They'd have around 25, 26 million. Charter would have to do a lot more deals. Maybe they can still sort of be a bottom feeder, as maybe if this deal is approved and it forces Comcast to throw off certain groups of subscribers in order to appease the Justice Department. It's possible that they'll pick up subscribers, but at the same time, they would need to do similar big deals to somehow get to that mass.
And they wouldn't have nearly the same amount of clout that Comcast would have because of their market share.
Well, that's part of the clout here, because if you have Comcast, Time Warner, all the big companies, they control production. Let's not forget about that now. They control the movies, they control the actual outlets themselves. So when you talk about bottom feeders like Charter, and I don't want to call Charter a bottom feeder, but it's just what we're considering them here.
I just mean in terms of the footprint, certainly.
You're exactly right. They're going to get gobbled up sooner or later, because if they can't provide the programming that people want, if it's controlled by the big guys who aren't going to license it out to them, they're stuck. Right. Which means eventually, aren't we heading towards a 1 or 2 cable tier anyway in this country? Maybe 10 years, but you might just have the 1 mega and maybe a couple little ones here and there.
I think you could argue that. I mean, look what happened in the 70s and 80s when the government brought antitrust suits against AT&T, fought that out for years, broke it up, and within like 15 years, they had sort of reassembled themselves back together again. So that could easily, I think, happen. Now, this is a little different. Like now you can get internet, fairly high bandwidth internet through your phone, 4G connections. Mm-hmm. Presumably, they could speed that up even further with, next generation technology. And perhaps that provides some other avenue. But again, as cell phone companies, like I talked about Verizon, maybe they pair up with Dish. Again, that means merging that programming side with the pipes side. And that makes a lot of people nervous, myself included.
And means rates are going to go up no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we have not seen a lot of loud regulatory objection from anybody on Capitol Hill so far, so it does appear like this one could happen, could go through. All right, Jeff, great to see you.
Thanks, John. Thanks,
Jeff
Ed.
Yastine, financial editor, Newsmax, moneynews.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Is there any possible way that your customer service could be better served by a mega merger of Comcast and Time Warner? We want to hear from you. Also, what do you think about a possible merger between AT&T and the Dish Network? We want to hear from you on that one as well. You can weigh in on our social media platforms at Newsmax TV. The hashtag is America's Forum. Reach out to us on email, connect@newsmaxtv.com, or find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Newsmax TV. We're back with a news update right after this break.